In this lecture, we are going to look at the Home tab. That is the second tab in your ribbon, and look at the different functions that it offers. Starting off with the font section, you have multiple formatting tools listed under it. So, for example, if I come back to the top of my data, and let's say in this cell, I want to write down Excel. How do I write down Excel? I simply click on that cell to select that cell. This green border around it will tell me that this cell is the one that is selected. And then I can start typing in whatever I want to input in this particular cell. So let's say I want to type in Excel here, hit enter to register that data with that cell, click on it again to select it, and now I can change the way this data looks like. So here I can change the color of it. So for example, from Calibri, I want to make it uh, Adobe Arabic like this. I can change the size of it. So I can from 12 make it, let's say, 16. These two buttons also do the same thing. It also helps you change the size. So if you click on this, you increase your font size. If you click on this button, you decrease your font size. Then you can also make it bold by clicking on this button, make it italic. So as you can see, now it is bold. If I click on this I button, it will become italic. And then I can also click on underline if I want to give an underline to my data. Now, as you can see, if I zoom in, this particular cell does not have a border. If I want to add a border, let's say I want to add a black border to this particular cell, I have to select this cell, go to this button called border, click on the drop down, and then select the type of border I want. Now, Excel gives you multiple options as to what type of border you want to enter for that particular cell. So you can select only the bottom border, top border, left border, and so on. So for example, if I only select the top border and click on top border, click away from the cell, can you see this top border which is black applied to my cell? That's because of this button. You can also choose to apply all borders, which will apply all borders around it. So if I click on this, you can see all the sides now have borders. What you can also do is apply a thicker border. So you can say thick outside borders, click on it, and now you have a thicker border for that particular cell. Now, in this cell, understand that there are two types of things involved. One is the cell, and second is the data inside the cell. So, for example, if you want to change the background of the cell, that is, if you want to fill the cell with a particular color, you select the cell and use this icon, which is called the fill color icon. So, next to it, you have a drop down. If you want to have another color, not yellow, but let's say I want to have a blue color, I can simply select blue, and that cell will have a fill of blue. What you can also do is change the color of the data inside it. So if I want to do that, I have to go to font color, which is this icon. Again, you have a drop down, clicking on which you have multiple options as to how you want to color it. So let's say I go with yellow. Okay, I click on this and the color changes to yellow of my data. Now, remember that Excel has memory. So even if you delete the data inside it by pressing delete and then type something else, for example, I type in Microsoft and hit enter, you can see that Microsoft still has an underline, still it's bold, italic, and also has the yellow color. So remember that Excel has memory. Even if you delete something from that cell and later type some other data, the other data that you have recently typed will also have the same formatting that you had previously applied to that cell. Now, If you want to, let's bring this back to Excel, hit enter. Now, as you can notice here, this data that we have in this cell is left aligned. So it is to the left of my cell. If I want to bring this to the center, how do I do it? Here, I have the option of align left, align center, and align right. So if I want to bring it to the center, I have to just click on center. If I want to bring it to the right, notice now how my cell is to the how my data actually is to the right hand side of my cell. Now, what you can also do is increase the row height. So, for example, if my row height was much more like this, and even my column height or my column width was actually something like this. Okay, so here you can see that our data is to the right hand side of my cell, but at the bottom right. So if you want to bring this to the top right, for example, you still want to keep it right, but just at the top right, that is here. How do you do it? Using the buttons above your alignment options, which is top align, middle align, and bottom align. So if I want to bring it to the top, I click on top align and it goes to the top. If I want to bring it to the bottom left, I select align left and then the bottom icon and it goes to the bottom. So that's it for alignment options in this lecture. And we'll start off with the other options that we have in the home tab from the next lecture. In this lecture, we are going to look at the other half of alignment options. Starting off with the first icon that we have here, which is this AB kind of an icon, which is called orientation. So, for example, if you want to change the way your text looks like, if you want to rotate it clockwise, counterclockwise, or even if you want to make it vertical, you can simply click on the icon and choose the style that you want. So, for example, here we have Excel written. If you want to make it vertically lined up here, so you can select vertical text, click on it, and if you increase the row height to look at your entire text, you will see Excel written vertically. If you want to bring it back to the original state, you can simply go back to that icon and whatever is selected in blue, which means that it is active right now, you can simply click on it to deactivate it. So if you click on it again, your cell will revert back to the original way that it was in, right? Next is decrease indent and increase indent, which basically helps you decide how much space you want from the border. So right now we have it as bottom left aligned. So your text is here. If you want to have just a little bit of space between your left border and your text, you can increase the indent, which is increase the space between your border and your data. So if I click on increase indent, we have just a small amount of space between the border and your data. If you want to decrease it, you can again click on just decrease indent and it will come back to the original state. If it was right aligned, and if you want to increase the gap, again, you could just click on increase indent and it would move just a tad bit towards the left. So that's increase and decrease indent. Now let's talk about two important functions in Excel, which is wrap text and merge and center. They are really simple, but are used quite commonly. So starting off with wrap text, imagine that I have a text written here, or why not even open a new sheet for this example. To do that, you can also click on new sheet here. So if you click on this, you have a new sheet inserted in your workbook. You can also rename this. So, for example, if I want to rename this as just an example sheet, I can simply right click on it and select rename. Or I can even double click on the sheet name to change it. So, if I double click, I can now edit the name as well. I can just call this example sheet. Okay. What I can also do is zoom in inside my workbook. So I can select the scroll bar here or even click on the zoom in button to zoom in my workbook. Now let's say I have a sentence here. For example, Excel is my favorite application. Full stop. So you can see that the text in which that I have written this sentence in is just this much. So it's starting from yo and ending yo. But the data that I have inside that cell is not fitting till yo. It's going outside that cell, outside that box. So it's kind of overflowing. Now, if you want to fit your entire data, your entire sentence, for example, in this cell, what you can do is click on wrap text. It basically changes the height of your row to fit in the entire data. It keeps the column width same. It only changes the row height. So if I click on wrap text, now it adjusts my row height to fit in my entire data. It will not change my column width. And this is actually dynamic. By dynamic, I mean that if you change your data, this height will also change. So, for example, if I write it is made by Microsoft and hit enter, now Excel has automatically changed the height of my row to fit in the new additional data. So that's the use of wrap text. It will change the row height, keep the column width same, and try to fit in your entire data within that cell. When it comes to merge and center, let's take another example. So let's say I'm writing data of COVID cases in Maharashtra. Okay, specifically to Maharashtra, no other state. So let's say I have a few details of patients. So let's say I have total cases. Okay, I have active cases. Then I have recovered. Okay, and then also deaths, for example. Now, all this data, let's say we have 1000 cases, we have out of that 200 active, 700 recovered, and 100 deaths. Now, I want to show the end user, the one that I'm sending this file to, that this is data for Maharashtra. So, how do I do that? I can simply start writing Maharashtra, like this. Now, what about this column? I also want to tell the user this active cases is also for Maharashtra. So should I again start typing Maharashtra here, do the same for recovered, do the same for deaths? Not really. Instead of doing that, what we can do is merge all these four cells into one big cell, which will tell that whatever is under it is representing Maharashtra. So if I delete this cell, what I can do is simply select all my four cells. So I can simply start off with the first cell, drag it across to this cell, and click on merge and center. As the name tells you, it will simply merge all the cells that are selected, and whatever data you had inside it will be centered. So if I click on merge and center, now as you can see, it's one big cell. At the top, you have small cells, but because we have merged this cell, it has become one big cell. You can see it because of the green borders around it. Okay, so it's one big cell here. So I can simply write down Maharashtra like this, and now it will tell you that the entire data below this, that is A, B, C, D column, is representing Maharashtra. So that's how you can merge a cell. If you want to come back to your original state, if you want to again have four individual cells, you can again simply click on merge and center. So when you have merge and center active in a particular cell, this will be dark gray. Because normally you can see all the selections that we have, center, align, merge and center, all of this is a bit more dark. It's a bit of a dark gray color as compared to the rest of the buttons that we have here. So that means that this button or this function is active here. If you want to deactivate it, simply click on it again. And now you will have four individual cells. As you can see now, we have four individual cells, and the data that we had in the merged cell will go to the first cell. Okay, so if I want to again bring it back to one big cell, I can simply select it again, merge and center, and the data for the first cell will be given to all the four cells into a one big cell here. So that's it for merge and center, and that's it for this lecture. And in the next lecture, we'll be looking at number formatting options. In this lecture, we'll be looking at the different number formatting options that Excel has and how they really work. For that, let's use our second sheet in our data. Right now, we do not require the example sheet from the previous lecture, so what we can do is simply delete it. I can right click on it and select delete. Excel will ask me if you want to permanently delete the sheet, and I will click on delete. That is yes. Coming to other details sheet, here we can fill out a few details of COVID in India. So, for example, the first thing that we have here is cost of a test. Let's say the cost of a test is 4,500 rupees. So I'll type down 4,500 and hit enter. Then the number of tests conducted in India. Let's say that is, let's keep a simple number. So let's say that is 1 lakh. Okay, so 1, 2 zeros, and then again 3 zeros. Hit enter. Coming to mortality rate, let's say that is 3% in India. So I'll simply write 3 here. Okay. Date of data record and time of record is something that we'll be looking at a later stage. Let's start off with the first number that we have here, which is cost of a test. Now, this 4,500, that is this number, is not just a random number. It's not the quantity of tests, that is how many tests were conducted. That is actually the price of a test. It involves a currency, which in this case is INR, right? So I simply do not want to give 4,500 as the number for the end user. What I want to do is to actually write a rupee symbol here. But how do I do that? Should I actually have a rupee symbol copied from somewhere and then inserted here? Not really. Instead, what you can do is take the help of Excel's number formatting options, which is this section under the Home tab. So at the top, you have a drop down. What you can do is simply go to a cell, go to the drop down, and inside that, you have the option of making it as currency. Once you click on it, Excel automatically adds a rupee symbol here and two zeros after the decimal. Now, notice that this is not manually added by you. So you do not, like, you don't actually add the rupee symbol here. You do not actually have this .00 typed in. This is just Excel's way of showing your data. So understand that the various formatting options that you have here is just the way Excel shows your data. It is not really a change that you have made, right? So here, if I zoom in a bit as well, what you can do is actually remove these two zeros, because that is something that we don't really require. We do not have our test cost in paise. It's not 4,537 paise or 54 paise. It's exactly 4,500. So what you can do is remove these two extra zeros. But if I try to edit this cell by double clicking, you can see that I only have 4,500. Nor do I have the rupee symbol, nor do I have that .00. So how do I remove that .00? What you can do is select that cell, and below the drop down, you see these two buttons, increase decimal and decrease decimal. You can make use of that. So clicking on these buttons either adds a decimal or removes a decimal. If you click on it once, for example, if I click on decrease decimal, it will remove one decimal at a time. So if I click on it right now, one decimal has gone away. If I click on it again, the second decimal has gone away. If I want to bring in a decimal, I can select increase decimal like this. Now, understand that this actually rounds off your number. So for example, if I had 4500.587 rupees, which is my cost, I could go to again drop down currency, change it to currency. I already have two decimals here, but my data is .587. Where's the third decimal? It has been rounded off to 59. Why? Because 7 is greater than 5. So it automatically adds 1 to 8 and makes it 9. So your data becomes 0.59. Now, if I wanted to round this off to only have one decimal, so if I try to decrease a decimal, it would again round off my data. So this 9, because it is higher than 5, will be added to 5 here, and this 5 will become 6. So if I click on decrease decimal, you can see it has turned into 6. Because this is 6, if I try to remove one more decimal, that is have no decimals in this data, my 4500 will become 4501. So remember, these buttons actually round off your data to the next decimal. It does not remove that extra part of your data completely. It simply rounds it up. Okay. Now that we have this data here, what I can do is remove the extra decimals. Coming to number of tests conducted in India. So what you can do for this data is go to the drop down and make Excel realize that this is a number. Okay, so we already looked at currency. Now, what we can do is specify this as a number because this is not really a currency, it's just a number. If I click on this, it adds that .00 at the end. That is something that we don't really require, so we can remove it as well. Now, one more thing that would be really helpful in this case is to have a thousands separator. So right now, this number, because it has a lot of zeros, is not really helping me to understand what the number is in the first look. Right? I need to actually pay attention to it, count the number of zeros, and figure out, acha, this is 1 lakh. But what if I don't want to do that? What if Excel could help me out in that? And you bet it can. So what you can do is simply use this option of comma style, which is next to your increase and decrease decimal buttons. You click on it, and Excel will add commas as thousand separators. So you have a comma before, or sorry, after thousands here, and after lakh as well. And so would be the case when it comes to crores. Okay, so now this number is more readable. I know that this is 1 lakh just by looking at the zeros and the commas. Here again, I can remove the decimals because understand that test cannot be half. No one can have a half of a test of COVID, right? So we can also decrease the decimal here and save up some data space. Okay. Coming to mortality rate. So mortality rate could be in percentages. Simply writing 3 does not help the user understand if it's percentage, 3 as in the 3 people, what is the mortality rate, right? So there are two ways to write down your answer or this mortality rate as percentages. The simplest and the easiest way that I would recommend you all to use is typing in 3 and then percent. So once I hit enter, I go back to this, you can see that Excel has automatically recognized this as percentage. If that was not the case, your cell would be set to general. So notice that if I click on this cell or this cell, whatever cells do not have a specified formatting will be set to general. Okay, general is basically Excel's way of telling us that we haven't selected any type of formatting to this cell. We haven't applied anything to this cell. But once we do that, once we change it to, let's say, a currency or a percentage, you will see that Excel is now displaying that information here in the drop down. So here you have percentage. You can do the same. For example, if it was 5%, right now, if you look at this cell, it is set to have no specific formatting. But as soon as I type 5% and hit enter, it changes to percentage. Another way to make this a percentage is to write the actual percent, then go to the drop down and change it to percentage. So for example, if I wanted to write 3% here, if I write 3 here, go to the drop down and then try to change it as percentage, see what will happen. Instead of changing it to 3%, Excel changes it to 300%. Now, why is that the case? Why does Excel do that? Does it not understand that 3 is actually 3%? Yes, actually, it doesn't. What you need to do is to actually type your percent from 0 to 1. Excel understands that language. So when you want to type in 3% using this method, instead of typing 3, you need to type 0.03. And that will help you change your data using the drop down into a percentage, which is 3%. This happens because percentages lie between 0 to 1. So it is per cent. Cent is 100. So your data will be from 0 to 1. So if you wanted to write 25%, it is not simply 2525, it is actually 0.25. Now, instead of using this long process of writing down something between 0 to 1, then going to the drop down, selecting it as percentage, what you can do is simply write it as the number and then add a percentage, and Excel will recognize it as a percentage. So this is the simple way of doing it. You can always opt for the drop down way. The answer or the value that you get here will remain the same. When it comes to date of data record, let's say we are trying to input today's date. So how do I do that? We have a shortcut for it in Excel, which is control and the semicolon in your keypad. Then you can hit enter and you get your date here already inserted using the shortcut. Now, if you look at it in the drop down, it is a short date. What if you want to have it as a long date? So when I say what is a long date actually, let's talk about that. Long date is actually where your month is typed as text. So if it's 07, it is July. What you can do is simply go to the drop down and change it to long date, and it will change it to 14 July 2020 instead of being 14/07/2020. Now, this is really helpful because it helps you avoid that process of changing your number to actual month name. Right now, we only have one cell which is having dates, but when you actually work with a lot more data, you will see that you will have a lot of cells having dates in that particular format. If you want to change it to a long date format, this is the easiest way to do it. Coming to the time of record, we also have a shortcut for that, which is Control Shift semicolon. So right now it is 5:50. I'll hit enter and you can see that I have the time here. I can change the formatting of this particular cell by going to the drop down and selecting time. Now, this really doesn't affect your data as such, right? Because earlier also we had 175000. Right now also we have that. But trust me, changing it into a time format later on helps you a lot. And how does it help you? Why do we have to do all of this? We'll come to that later. So for right now, this is the way to go. Another way in which you can type down your time is by saying AM or PM. So if it's 5:50 PM, I can simply write 5:50 PM. And if I go to the drop down and change it to time, Excel will show me the 24-hour format. For the last thing in this lecture, let's discuss how to change the currency involved here. So right now we have rupee 4500. What if I was showing this data to someone who is based in the US? He might want to see this data in, let's say, dollars. So how do we change this to dollar? Let's say 4500 is, let's say, roughly $40, for example. Okay. Yeah, it is $40. Now, how do I change this dollar to, how do I change this to dollars instead of having rupees? I can simply go to the drop down that is at the bottom here, which is called accounting number format. Click on the drop down, which helps me look at the different currency options that I have in Excel, and I can choose from it. So if I want dollar, I can simply select dollar, and my rupee will change to dollar. If I want to have it as euro or Chinese or just pound, all of that, I can select that from here as well. If you want to have more currency options, Excel has currencies for all the countries in the world. You can go to more accounting formats, and from the symbol, you can select whatever you want. Okay, you have a list of options. Once done, you can simply hit enter and have it here. So that's it for this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.